Nobody taught you this because it's not comfortable to admit. Most people aren't manipulated by a lack of intelligence. They're manipulated by an excess of innocence. They believe they're playing a fair game, while the other person has already decided they're going to win, no matter the cost. And that's exactly why you've left situations thinking, how did I not see that before? The truth is simple, direct, and almost uncomfortable. You didn't lose because you were weak. You lost because you were playing by the wrong rules. While you were trying to be understood, someone was applying strategy. While you were reacting, someone was observing. While you were explaining, someone had already decided the outcome. Now answer me honestly, how many times have you felt you were being manipulated but didn't know exactly what to do? Or worse, reacted in the moment and then realized you only made the situation worse? That's not a lack of control, it's a lack of method, because nobody ever taught you how to deal with this kind of game. And here's the turning point. You don't need to be more aggressive. You need to be more strategic. What you're going to see here aren't behavioral tips. They're psychological shifts that completely change the dynamics of any interaction. Things that once you understand them, you can never unsee. And perhaps that's the most dangerous thing, because once you learn, you start seeing patterns everywhere. Ordinary conversations cease to be so ordinary. People cease to be so predictable. And you realize there's a game happening all the time, silent, subtle, and extremely real. The question is no longer whether someone will try to manipulate you. The question is, will you continue reacting as before, or will you finally learn how to play the game? If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He doesn't always realize it immediately, and that's precisely the problem. Those who play dirty rarely announce their game. On the contrary, they put on a veneer of virtue, smile, agree, seem like allies. But behind the scenes, they're already operating based on a policy guided by reality, not ideals. This is where many fall. They expect consistency, but receive strategy. An experienced mentor would say that the first sign isn't the direct attack, it's the silent inconsistency. The person promises something and doesn't deliver, changes the narrative according to the environment, tests limits with small actions. It's almost as if they're measuring how far they can go, and those who don't understand this react emotionally and lose control of the situation right from the start. The unprepared mind seeks justice. The strategic mind observes patterns. Now think of a common environment, work, college, or even family. Someone starts distorting small stories, positioning themselves as a victim or planting doubts about you. It's not a frontal attack yet. It's a calculated, almost invisible move. Here comes a classic principle of Niccolo Machiavelli: decisions based on real human nature. Manipulative people don't play fair, they play to win. And often, even unknowingly, they apply the concept that the end justifies the means. The mistake of those who aren't paying attention is reacting as if they were in a fair environment, but they aren't. A good exercise here is simple. Start noting repetitive behaviors of certain people. Who changes their posture a lot? who speaks differently depending on who is present. This pattern reveals more than any beautiful speech. And here's the game changer. Recognizing doesn't mean reacting. Most people, upon realizing someone is playing dirty, immediately confront the manipulator, and that's exactly what they expect. Because when you react, you expose yourself, and when you expose yourself, you lose your advantage. Strategy doesn't begin with action, it begins with reading. This is where true virtue and fortuna are born, the ability to interpret the scenario and act at the right moment. It's not about being paranoid, but about being aware. And when that awareness begins to develop, an inevitable question arises. If reacting impulsively is a mistake, then what is the best response? He thinks that responding quickly is a sign of strength, but most of the time, it's just a reflection of a lack of control. Anyone who understands the game knows the first to react emotionally has already lost half the battle. That's because, by reacting, he gives away exactly what the other person wants, access to his inner state. And whoever has access to your emotions has power over your decisions. Here comes one of the most ignored principles of strategy. It's better to be feared than loved, but never to be predictable. Impulsive reactions make you predictable. Silence, on the other hand, silence creates discomfort, doubt, and above all, space for you to observe. While the other person waits for an answer, you are analyzing, and that completely changes the game. Imagine a practical situation. Someone provokes you in public, makes a passive-aggressive comment, or tries to destabilize you in front of other people. The natural impulse is to respond immediately, defend yourself, prove you're right. But by doing so, you enter their frame of reference. They set the pace, and you simply reacted. Now think differently. You listen, maintain your composure, and don't react immediately. Sometimes a simple, "I understand," or even absolute silence breaks the expectation. This generates a powerful psychological effect. The other person begins to question themselves. Was it enough? Weren't they affected? Are they planning something? This kind of doubt corrodes more than any aggressive response. This is the calculated use of force. It's not inaction, it's the strategic choice of the right moment. Great strategists have always understood this. Sun Tzu already said that the best victory is the one that doesn't require direct combat. And when you apply this to your daily life, you realize that not every provocation deserves a response. Some deserve observation. Because every reaction you make is information you deliver, and those who play dirty collect this information as ammunition. Therefore, developing the habit of pausing before responding is one of the most valuable skills you can build. A practical tip: when you feel like responding to something in the heat of the moment, wait at least 10 minutes. If it's a message, don't respond immediately. If it's in person, use neutral phrases. This small delay already puts you in a position of control. And when you start controlling time, you start controlling something even more important: the narrative. He still believes that winning is about arguments, but it isn't. Winning, most of the time, is about who defines the meaning of things before they even happen. This is called framing. Whoever controls the framing controls the perception, and whoever controls the perception practically decides the outcome before the game even begins. This is where many lose without realizing it. They enter discussions trying to prove they are right, but they are already playing within a scenario that the other person has constructed. A scenario where, even if they win the argument, they have already lost the position. Real strategy begins before the conversation, before the conflict, before the reaction. It's about shaping the terrain. It's exactly the kind of thinking aligned with decisions based on real human nature, not on illusions of justice or pure logic. Consider a simple example. Someone starts labeling you. You're difficult, you're cold, you're complicated. If you become defensive, trying to explain that you're none of those things, you've already fallen into the trap. Because you accepted their framing. Now you're reacting to a narrative you didn't create. A strategist does the opposite. They redefine the game. Instead of denying, they reposition. Something like, I'm not difficult. I'm selective about what I accept. Or do you see the difference? The same situation, a different framing. This completely changes how people see you. This is where the concept of virtuous appearance comes in. Not in the sense of falsehood, but of conscious control of your image. You don't let others define who you are. You present it strategically. That's silent power. And when you start to master this, you realize something even deeper. Most people don't argue about facts. They argue about interpretations. And whoever offers the strongest, most confident, and most coherent interpretation tends to win. That's why great leaders, entrepreneurs, and even experienced manipulators invest so much in narrative. They don't fight over every detail. They shape the overall context. This requires constant adaptability. At times you'll be direct, at others more subtle. In some cases you'll ignore, in others you'll reposition. But always with the awareness that the real game isn't on the surface. It's in how things are perceived. And when that perception starts to come under your control, a new opportunity arises. If you already understand the game and control the narrative, why not start observing more precisely where the other person is weak? He still believes that strength is about attacking first, but those who truly master the game understand that strength is knowing where to attack, and especially when not to attack. Because attacking too early is wasting information. Before any move, there is a silent phase that few respect: observation. It is at this stage that real advantage is built. While the other acts on impulse, he observes patterns, reactions, insecurities, vanities. Each person carries vulnerable points: need for approval, fear of rejection, inflated ego, lack of control. And all this appears in the details, in the tone of voice, in changes in behavior, in small contradictions. This is where one of the coldest pillars of strategy comes in. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals. It doesn't matter how you would like people to be. What matters is how they really are. Now consider a practical situation. Someone in your environment always needs to be right, interrupts others, and doesn't accept being contradicted. Most people try to confront them directly and lose. But a strategic observer does things differently. They perceive a clear weakness: the ego. And instead of confronting directly, they begin to guide the person. They ask questions that lead the other person to open up, partially agree to gain space, and let the other person's own excesses work against them. This isn't manipulation in the superficial sense. This is the calculated use of force. You don't need to push someone to their knees if they're already unbalanced. Another example, someone who constantly seeks validation. Instead of attacking, you slowly withdraw approval. The behavior changes, insecurity appears, and there you understand exactly how this person functions. And here's the detail that separates amateurs from strategists. You don't attack immediately, because attacking early reveals your intentions, and revealed intentions lose power. A good strategist gathers information before acting. They understand that true power lies in knowing the terrain, and the most important terrain is the other person's mind. This requires patience, discipline, and above all, emotional control. Because many times you'll see the weakness, and you'll want to act right away. But hold back, because the right moment hasn't arrived yet. And when that moment arrives, the impact is much greater. It's as if the other person doesn't even understand what happened. And it's precisely at this point that the game begins to move from the invisible realm to something even more delicate: public perception, reputation. He still thinks that winning a conflict is about winning the argument, but anyone who understands strategy knows that the real battlefield is reputation. Because in the end, people don't just judge facts, they judge perceptions, and perceptions are shaped, not discovered. Here comes one of the most sophisticated ideas associated with Niccolo Machiavelli. Avoiding being hated is as important as gaining power. It's no use being right and being seen as wrong. It's no use winning in private and losing in public. The strategist doesn't fight to prove. He builds a position where the other alone begins to seem inconsistent. This is reputation warfare, silent, gradual, and extremely effective. And the most interesting thing, whoever executes well is almost never perceived as the one responsible. Imagine a professional environment. Two people clash. One reacts, accuses, raises their voice, tries to expose the other directly. The other maintains composure, delivers consistent results, communicates clearly, and avoids direct confrontation. Over time, what happens? Even if no one knows all the details, a collective perception begins to form. One seems unstable, the other seems reliable. This doesn't happen by chance, it's built. Small actions, repeated over time, create a solid image. This is where the appearance of virtue becomes a powerful tool. Not in the sense of pretending, but of understanding that your image needs to be managed intentionally. If someone tries to destabilize you, you don't respond at the same level. You raise the level. You maintain consistency, coherence, and control. This makes any attack against you seem disproportionate. And here's the most strategic point. You don't need to destroy the other person directly. Simply create an environment where they destroy themselves. People who play dirty when they don't receive an emotional reaction begin to intensify their behavior. They talk more, exaggerate more, expose themselves more. And in this process, they reveal exactly what you've already observed, their weaknesses. The strategist's role is simply to ensure this happens within a context where you are well positioned. This requires constant adaptability and patience, because reputation isn't built overnight, but it's also not destroyed by a single blow. It's a process. And when this process begins to yield results, an inevitable dilemma arises. How far to go? To what extent is tolerance intelligence? And when does it begin to become weakness? He believes that always being understanding is a virtue. But in practice, it's often just an invitation to be exploited. There comes a point when tolerance ceases to be intelligence and becomes permission. And those who play dirty realize this quickly. They test, advance, measure limits until they understand that there are no real consequences. This is where one of the most uncomfortable yet profoundly real principles comes in. It's better to be feared than loved, as long as you know how to avoid being hated. It's not about gratuitous aggression, but about establishing limits that have weight. Because without consequences, any rule becomes a suggestion. And those who understand strategy know that true respect doesn't just come from sympathy, it comes from the predictability of consequences. Consider a common situation. Someone in your environment continues to subtly disrespect you. Lateness, lack of commitment, small acts of sabotage. You've tried talking, overlooking things, understanding. Nothing has changed. The mistake here is believing that more dialogue will solve the problem. Sometimes it does. But when it doesn't, insisting on it only reinforces the weakness of your position. A strategist changes their approach. They apply a clear, proportionate, and silent consequence. This could be cutting off access, limiting interaction, withdrawing benefits, or simply ceasing collaboration as before. There's no need to shout or create a scene. Just act. This is the calculated use of force. The person notices, even if they don't admit it. And more importantly, they understand that there is a real limit. And here's the point that few people see. Strategic cruelty isn't about hurting. It's about correcting the behavior of the system around you. When you don't set boundaries, you teach people to disrespect you. When you do, you redefine the game. This requires emotional control and inner clarity, because it often goes against the impulse to be nice or avoid conflict. But strategy isn't about comfort, it's about results. And when that change happens, something interesting emerges. Some people distance themselves, others adjust. And those who depended on your tolerance begin to miss something essential. And that's exactly where the next move comes in, controlling access and what you offer. He still believes that ignoring is weakness. But in practice, strategically ignoring is one of the most powerful weapons that exist. Because every manipulator depends on something to operate, and that something is almost always invisible: attention, validation, emotional reaction, or direct access to you. Without it, they lose strength. It's like a fire without oxygen. The problem is that most people fuel this fire without realizing it. They respond too quickly, over-explain, try to justify themselves, engage in unnecessary debates, and each of these actions reinforces the other person's behavior. A strategist understands that often the best response isn't a response at all. It's the absence of one. This isn't passivity. It's politics guided by reality, not by ideals. Think of someone who constantly provokes you or tries to drag you into conflict. If you always respond, even if you're right, you're training that person to continue. Now imagine that consistently you begin to take away what they seek. Fewer responses, fewer explanations, less availability. Not dramatically, but gradually and in a controlled manner. The effect is immediate. The person tries to intensify their behavior to regain control. They may provoke more, insist more, test new approaches. And it is precisely at this moment that you maintain your position. Because whoever gives in at this point returns to the cycle. Whoever stands firm breaks the pattern. This is constant adaptability applied in practice. You don't react to the behavior, you alter the system that allows it to exist. And here's the most strategic detail. Cutting off the supply isn't just about the other person, it's about you. It's about learning not to depend on approval, validation, or the need to solve everything right away. Because often, the manipulator only has power because you still need something from them, be it recognition, acceptance, or even to avoid discomfort. When you cut that off internally, the game changes completely. And the most interesting thing, without access, without reaction, and without control, the manipulator begins to lose their balance. And when that happens, an even more refined opportunity arises, one that doesn't depend on confrontation or explanation, only on presence and positioning. Because in the end, it's not the noise that commands respect. It's something much more subtle. He thinks that commanding respect means speaking loudly, confronting, putting the other person in their place. But that's amateurish. Those who understand strategy know that true impact doesn't come from noise. It comes from the feeling that lingers afterward. The most effective fear isn't explicit, it's implicit. It's the kind that makes the other person think twice before acting, even when you're not present. And this isn't built with emotional outbursts, but with consistency, poise, and controlled unpredictability. Here, again, comes a classic principle associated with Niccolo Machiavelli. It's better to be feared than loved, provided you know exactly how to apply this without falling into hatred, because those who shout lose respect. Those who maintain control create presence. Think of someone who never raises their voice, never gets into unnecessary arguments, but when they decide to act, they act with precision. This person doesn't need to prove anything. The people around them sense it. They know there are limits. They know there are consequences, even if they rarely need to demonstrate them. This is subtle intimidation. A practical example. Instead of repeatedly arguing with someone who oversteps boundaries, you simply change your posture, reduce access, alter behavior, make firm decisions without warning. The absence of explanation in this case generates more impact than any speech. This is the calculated use of force. You don't threaten, you demonstrate indirectly that there is a line that should not be crossed. And here's the most refined point. Functional fear doesn't come from aggression. It comes from the consistency between action and consequence. If you set limits and don't uphold them, you lose credibility. If you uphold them, even rarely, you create a silent reputation, and that reputation spreads without you having to say anything. This requires virtù and fortuna, the ability to act and the sensitivity to choose the right moment, because excess also destroys. Those who try to intimidate all the time become predictable. Those who use this with precision become a reference point. And when that presence begins to consolidate, the game changes level once again. Because from this point on, you no longer need to directly attack the person. You can attack what sustains their power. He still believes that winning means directly attacking the person. But anyone who masters strategy knows that this is the most inefficient approach. Attacking the ego generates a reaction, and reaction generates direct conflict. The true strategist doesn't fight against the person, he dismantles what gives them power, because all manipulative behavior relies on some structure, social influence, access to information, a built reputation, alliances, or even emotional dependence on other people. When you understand this, the game changes completely. Instead of confrontation, you create displacement. Instead of attack, you create emptiness. This is politics guided by reality, not by ideals. You stop trying to correct the other person and start altering the environment in which they operate. Consider a clear example. Someone at work manipulates narratives because they are close to certain people or control information. Most people try to confront them directly and lose because the other person already has a structural advantage. Now consider the strategic approach. You start building your own connections, improve your communication with other departments, document processes, and clearly state your position in meetings. Without attacking anyone, you reduce the space where the other person operates. Gradually, their influence diminishes, not because you brought down the person, but because you removed the support that sustained them. This is the calculated use of force at the highest level. There is no noise, no direct confrontation, just a change of scenery. And here's the most powerful point. When you attack the structure, the other party often doesn't even understand what happened. They feel a loss of control. They realize something has changed, but they can't react precisely because there's no clear target to attack back. This requires constant adaptability and a long-term vision. It's not about quick wins, it's about definitive victory. And when that foundation begins to crumble, only one last step remains, one that many neglect due to excessive emotion or carelessness. Because there's no point in weakening if you leave room for everything to revert to the way it was before. He thinks that solving the problem is enough, but in practice, solving it isn't the same as ending it. Many get this far, make good moves, regain control, and then relax. And that's exactly when everything comes back. Because those who play dirty don't need much, just an opening, a small opening, an emotional vulnerability, a chance to revert to the old pattern. That's why the strategist doesn't just think about winning the current conflict, he thinks about eliminating the possibility of repetition. This requires composure, clarity, and above all, consistency. This is where Niccolò Machiavelli's principle appears most directly. When acting, act in a way that eliminates the need to repeat it. It's not about intensity, it's about decisiveness. Consider a common example. You've already identified the behavior, controlled your reaction, repositioned your image, cut off access, and weakened the other person's structure. But you still maintain small points of contact, unnecessary conversations, emotional openness, occasional availability. This is enough to reactivate the cycle. A strategist eliminates these loose ends. They define clear boundaries and maintain those boundaries over time. They don't back down out of guilt. They don't reopen space out of convenience. This is virtù and fortuna applied with discipline. Because in the end, it's not the initial movement that sustains the result. It's its continuity. And this requires a mindset that few develop, that of not negotiating with what has already proven to be harmful. And here's the final point, and most importantly, ending things isn't about destroying the other person. It's about protecting your own system. It's about ensuring that your energy, your focus, and your direction are no longer drained by games that don't serve you. When you do this, something changes internally. You stop reacting to the environment and start defining the environment. And this change is silent but profound. People notice, dynamics change. And most interestingly, those who previously tried to manipulate you simply stop trying, because they understand, even if they won't admit it, that there's no more room for it. And when this cycle ends, something new emerges, not just control, but strategic freedom. The kind that allows you to choose where to enter, and most importantly, where never to return. Now the question is no longer what to do. It's what you're going to do with everything you've just understood, because knowledge that doesn't translate into action becomes an illusion of control. You've seen how the game really works. You've realized it's not about brute force, but about reading, positioning, and decision-making. And now there's no going back. You can try to ignore it, but that feeling will remain. The feeling that from today onward, you see more than before. And that comes at a price, the price of no longer accepting certain behaviors. So let me challenge you directly. In what situation in your life are you still reacting instead of leading? Where are you still over-explaining, over-compromising, over-tolerating? Who still has easy access to your emotions today? These answers aren't comfortable, but they're exactly where your power is being drained. And if you don't change that, nothing changes. Strategy isn't theory. It's decisions applied at the right moment. It's silence when everyone else is shouting. It's action when everyone else is hesitating. It's control when everyone else is reacting. Now tell me, are you going to keep playing the way you always have, or are you going to start applying this for real? If this kind of content made you see something new, then you already know the next step. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay tuned, because this is just the beginning. There's so much more to human behavior that nobody tells you, and those who understand this simply play at another level.